tragic. I mean, we started our week off quite tragically. We saw Dana Air crashing yesterday. We also heard about Allied Airlines that crashed, Allied Airlines, which is a Nigerian airline company that crashed into a bus in Ghana. Now, we're still waiting to hear a clear response from authorities, of course, as to what exactly happened. What implications do you think this will have on these two companies, these two aviation companies here in Nigeria?
I think initially, because they're both private companies, so the effect on the market is limited in that sense. But I think initially they probably have their operations suspended while investigations go on into what the cause of the two crashes, find out the operational problems, and so that could obviously affect their operations going forward. I think but it's a bit too early to say because we still haven't reports from the accident investigators as to exactly what happened.
But Kayode, what is the implication for the airline company, sector in general? Of course, you know, plane crashes like this are not uncommon in Nigeria, of course, and a lot of these companies are private, you know. So what do you think about what's going on exactly in that sector and what the government is doing also to regulate some of these things?
I think the domestic, especially domestic aviation sector, has been under a lot of pressure. Aviation owners have said that they need foreign exchange for spare parts, operational costs. There've been complaints. They've been asking for a bailout. I think this kind of buys into it because the situation you have, I think the government has to take a holistic view into this and look at all these companies. Should we have private companies? Should they be publicly listed? Should their accounts be public? Should their audits by the aviation authorities be public? And should there be increased minimum capital requirements? Because you have situations like, for example, Dana Air had 2 aircraft. And you have airlines that have 1, 2 aircraft operating. Is that conducive? Can they be economically viable if you only have 2 aircraft operating? I think those are all the kind of questions the government has to look at and form a holistic answer going forward to try and improve this. Because we had a similar situation in 2005 when we had a spate of air crashes where government said they're going to move forward. They had the various committees, things did improve. But I think we'd have to look at it more from how we organize our domestic aviation industry.
Well, that's interesting. But let's turn our attention now to the markets. Of course, we know the index was in the bears last week, shedding about 121 basis points. Now, traders are saying that investors, of course, are continuing to trade with caution, closing their bids with bargains. What's your take on this and why our market doesn't seem to be, it seems to be struggling, in other words?
I think it's going to continue struggling until there's a catalyst. There were rumors that there's a federal government looking at a bailout for the brokers. Because in essence, a big problem with the market is there's a lack of domestic investment, either from the pension funds who are investing just a bare minimum and from retail investors. And until the broker issue is addressed, you're going to continue having those problems. Now, there was a rumor that the Minister of Finance said they were looking into a bailout, but the problem the government has that there's a moral hazard problem. They don't create a moral hazard because some of these brokers, they're going into trouble because they overtraded. Now, are you going to bail them out for overtrading or are you going to just leave the market? So I think those situations the government is wrestling with.
Now, we did hear from Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala last week, the Minister of Finance. She did say in Arusha during the AFDB meeting that she was actually going to give forbearance to some of these stockbrokers that were having liquidity issues. What's your take on this? I mean, what should we expect to see from the government in that area?
I think what they're going to do is they're going to look at a lot of the margin positions the brokers were in. I think those brokers who there are allegations of impropriety, I think they'll be excluded from the process. Those brokers who basically possibly just overstretched and the market went against them, I think there's a position that there could be some forbearance in that. But I think it's going to be quite a complicated process, and but hopefully something will be done before the end of the year.
Well, let's look at some stocks. Transcorp, one of the well-performing stocks on the stock market last week. We saw profit taking, shaving some points off that stock, off its share price. But the stock did trade volumes in excess of 146.4 million units. Now, investors seem to be very keen on that stock. Can you give me a picture of what's really going on there?
Well, Transcorp was set up under the Obasanjo regime to be based on the South African tribals and be a national champion. There were some political problems and some issues with the board. But I think since the strategic takeover by Tony Elumelu and his holding company, there've been a strategic push. The main asset in Transcorp is Transcorp Hilton in Abuja, which has one of the highest occupancy rates in the world and is a very profitable hotel. And based on that, they've made 3 important announcements which have encouraged investors. One is their oil and gas operations. They've announced a rejig of the financial implications there and a big push in that because they have a couple of oil blocks. They move into agribusiness. They opened a fruit juice factory in Benue State, which is supposed to be doing quite well. And they've announced that they're going to start building more hotels across Nigeria with an international party. So I think a lot of investors are being encouraged by that, and they see that the Transcorp stock can only go upwards. I think that's what's endangered that.
But I want to talk about the banking sector. We see, traders are saying that it bore the brunt of profit taking last week, and specifically Zenith Bank. It used to be one of the hot stocks, that investors went for. But once again, we saw 54 kobo reduction in price. It closed actually at 13.45 naira. Why is this stock not so hot anymore?
I think if you look at the last 3 years, when the banking sector was under pressure, Zenith held up quite well compared to its peers. And so its valuation has been quite high compared to others. I think investors on one hand are looking at the valuation of Zenith compared to its peers and deciding that they're going to mark it down. I think secondly, Zenith's strength has really been the corporate market. And Nigeria, especially the high-end corporate market, is overbanked at the moment. A lot of people are focusing on that. And you have new entrants like Rand Merchant Bank, JP Morgan, Citigroup, who are trying to come into the market and will upgrade into the market and really focus on those areas. So they're going to be under pressure in that sense. So I think a lot of investors are looking at and trying to decide, is the strategy, is it in the medium to long term, can that strategy keep on going?
And what about consumer goods stocks? I mean, for example, Dangote Fleur, we saw it performing quite well. Then all of a sudden, it's not performing as well. What do you make of speculations that it was to sell a stake to Tiger Brands? And then is it speculation? Was it just speculation? Because we're seeing investors sort of losing interest in that stock now. So what do you make of these reports that it was going to sell at least 80% out to private investors and some of its stake, of course, to Tiger Brands? Was it just speculation?
I don't think so. I mean, there was no official announcements. There was the speculation in the market. Everyone knows Tiger Brands have been looking to enter Nigeria, and this seemed like a good fit, especially when a few months ago, Dangote seemed to suggest that they were going to concentrate on certain areas, and fast consumer goods was not one of them. So everyone speculated they were going to try down there. But there's been a slowdown. People are expecting an announcement, and no announcement has been forthcoming. So people are saying maybe there's an issue on terms of valuation, or there's an issue in the thing. So I think investors are pulling back and waiting to see.